Back here on CBS Sports HQ, the third set of college football playoff rankings have been released. And right now, the big story, Richard, is the fact that Alabama has fallen 6 spots, going from 4 all the way down to 10 after their loss to Oklahoma. Your reaction is what?
Tumbled, and I didn't think they would go further than 10 because that would mean that they are effectively out of the college football playoff if it were to be played today. Remember, because the 5th highest ranked conference champion projected right now is Tulane, sitting at 24. And then the ACC champion, whoever that may be, I think it's Georgia Tech right now, is the projected leader right now. Georgia Tech would be the 11th seed. So you got to be in the top 10 of the rankings to make the actual dance when we get to Selection Sunday. That's about how it's shaping up right now. So having Bama still in, I think, is noteworthy because you have to have, I imagine the committee thought, Oklahoma in because they just beat Alabama, and they have to have Oklahoma above Alabama because they beat Alabama. So Alabama's sitting at 10. That's right there. I mean, there is no more room for error for Alabama.
What's the thinking then if you're putting Alabama behind Notre Dame?
I just think you like Notre Dame. You like the way Notre Dame is playing right now. You like what Notre Dame has done after.
If you put those two teams on a field, who would win that game? Notre Dame and Alabama.
I'm taking Notre Dame.
Okay.
I'm taking Notre Dame on a neutral.
Does that play into what is being done here in these rankings?
I think so. I think you're taking Notre Dame on a neutral field right now against Alabama, and I do think that plays into where they slotted them.
So Alabama falling all the way to 10. Oklahoma moved up 3 spots to 8. We now know that Georgia's in the top 4. Do you see anything here in the top 12 that you look at and you go, I don't like that, or I agree with that, they got this right?
This is about how you expected it to shake out, the way I'm looking at it right now, shaking out. Yeah, I don't really have, especially when you get above Notre Dame and Oklahoma, and we've still got some ball left to play here, right? You don't know that Oklahoma isn't going to stub their toe against LSU, for instance. You don't know that they're not going to stub their toe coming home here against Missouri this week, even though, both people may play, may not play, we don't know. But this Oklahoma offense has not been much to write home about, right? Yes, their defense played really well, gave them gifts against Alabama in the form of multiple turnovers, and they were able to win that game. But I don't think Oklahoma is this unimpeachable team to get in the college football playoff in that they can win out. Obviously, their ranking means they are in. But I just don't know that Oklahoma's going to win out here coming home.
All right, let's welcome in 2 more members into CBS Sports HQ, 2-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden and former ACC Player of the Year Danny Kanell. B-Mac, your initial reaction here, Alabama falling all the way to 10.
I'm a bit surprised. That was a close game against Oklahoma, a national ranked team in Oklahoma, elite-like defense. And them being at 10 now, I mean, for Alabama, Richard, you made a key point with Alabama. They're in a very, very unusual spot based on what they've done. When you look at their resume, and they have no room for error. So I'm a bit surprised, but I can tell you this much. To Richard's point, you'd rather be at 10 than being at 12 or 13. Because I feel like if Alabama, if they went out, win in the Iron Bowl against Auburn, I highly doubt the committee would leave Alabama outside the top 12. So I'm a bit surprised to see them at 10, but I still think if they take care of their business, they will find a seat at the table in the playoffs.
Danny, I'm just a little confused a little bit of why Alabama's behind Notre Dame. Does that make sense to you, or you can see both sides of it?
The committee loves Notre Dame.
Yep.
I mean, that's been pretty evident that they love the way they're playing right now. They have been able to forget about their 2 losses, which happened the first 2 weeks of the season, and they've fallen in love with Notre Dame, and they're not backing down from it. I mean, if you went by wins, who have you beaten, it's not even close. Now, I do think the thing that's interesting about Alabama, and everybody kind of forgot about, is the loss to Florida State is a bad loss. Like, that's just the reality of what it is. By 2 touchdowns, first week of the season, it's a bad loss. But Bama by far has better wins than Notre Dame. I mean, it's not even close when you consider they've beaten Georgia, they've beaten Vanderbilt, who's a top 15, they've beaten Tennessee, who's a top 25 team currently in the rankings. It's just, but I think BMAC nailed it, though. Bama controls their own destiny.
Yep.
Bama wins out, they're in. Now, I'd worry about Bama a little bit losing to Auburn. That's going to be a tough game on the road in the Iron Bowl. And, they just got beat by a really strong defensive team that's very similar makeup. So I think Alabama controls their own destiny, but it's very clear that Notre Dame, the committee loves Notre Dame. And I would say they don't love Miami because Miami's still, they've closed that gap somewhat between Notre Dame, but Miami has better wins than Notre Dame, and they beat them head to head.
Yeah, but Danny, one thing to note here, and you mentioned the gap, right, between Notre Dame and Miami. People are going to say, well, just like you did, the Miami beat Notre Dame. You don't judge that head-to-head unless they are in the binary of comparable teams. Right now, they are too far away. That's the point you're making there. They're too far away for that head-to-head to come in. Now, Miami has narrowed that gap. I mean, they were in the 18 in the first
4.
Right. They were
8
18.
spots to 6 spots to now 4. They need to get a couple more to get in that same pod so that they stack them up next to each other. But even that being said, I don't know if the committee just, if they do get next to them, says, oops, we've been wrong all along. I think Miami just might be screwed.
Yeah, well, they might be. In fact, they need like BYU to lose this week. They need BYU to drop a game here the last 2 weeks of the season.
Here's what I tell you could help Miami here coming home. The funny thing about Notre Dame, while they are not in a conference, they do have the scheduling agreement with the ACC where they play 5 ACC teams, which means they have 4 common opponents with Miami, and 2 of them are still to come. Notre Dame plays Syracuse this week, and they play Stanford at the end of the season. Notre Dame's going to have to show in those games, I think, to completely win the binary debate if they get into one with Miami. Remember, your common opponents matter.
Indeed they do, and they will have a common opponent at the end of the season in Pitt. Let's take a look at the top 25 here. We have a change in the top 4. Georgia beating Texas, Alabama falling to Oklahoma, so Georgia now would receive a bye. Perhaps Georgia and Alabama will play for the SEC title, but we know Texas A&M still has the lead path there. We'll wait to see how that shakes out. Texas Tech at 5, and Ole Miss up 1 spot to 6. Oregon up 1 spot to 7. As we mentioned, Oklahoma up 3 spots to 8. Here's what it looks like 13 through 25. So Miami ranked 13th, but the path for Miami to get to the ACC Conference Championship game is really difficult. First, they got to win out. They need Pitt to beat Georgia Tech this week. They need Virginia Tech to beat UVA next week. They need SMU to lose their last 2, and they need Duke to lose 1 of 2 games. They play North Carolina and Wake Forest. So that's a tough path for Miami to get into the conference championship. But their overall conference, overall record does look good enough, but it might not be good enough. And our group of 5 representative out of the American will be Tulane right now. So they would have the 12 seed. And right now, as we stand, it would be Miami as the representative out of the ACC. But as I just listed, going to be tough for them to get to the conference championship. Right now, it's looking like Georgia Tech in the driver's seat there, coming in at 16th in the country. All right, so you take a look at what we just laid out there for for Notre Dame, and for Miami. When you look at what could happen here, if you're talking about helping or needing a team to lose, BYU could be that bid thief, right? If BYU wins out, goes to the Big 12 championship, the committee's going to have a hard time not including Texas Tech.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 title loser, if BYU wins out and gets there and Texas Tech wins out and get there, I think the Big 12 loser will also be in the dance, because the committee has been very hard-pressed to ding teams that lose in the conference championship game. Because theoretically, if you're in a conference championship game, you have the 13th data point, and that 13th data point would be a good loss, quote-unquote, because you're in a conference championship game. So you're losing to a conference champion. So, yeah, I do think conferences still matter, even though we all like to throw that away and we don't like to worry about it, we don't like to talk about it. Conferences still matter, and I do think conference races still matter. Miami, I understand that Miami had a great non-conference slate, but you also have to take care of business in your league, and Miami hasn't done that.
I think one thing, BMAC, that the committee has made pretty clear, if you have a 0 or a 1 in your loss column, you will be ranked in front of a 2-loss team. It doesn't matter if you have 4 ranked wins. It doesn't matter if you have to come back, you're down by 27, you're Texas A&M. You're going to stay at the top because of that overall record.
Yeah, and it's about the timing of when you lose, right? I think that's very, very significant when you look at how the ranking is assembled now, especially with the most recent loss happening with Alabama this past weekend. But when you look at the top tier teams, I mean, that's status quo. I mean, when you look at what's happening now, I mean, Ole Miss, I'm sorry, they have Mississippi State left, right? When you look at Oregon, they have USC. I mean, then you look at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the one team that is currently sitting in a very, very comfortable seat, but I don't know if they will stay there because, yes, they have 2 competitive games left to be played where chaos could take place once again when you look at Mizzou and LSU to finish out the season. So there's a lot of things that could shake up in terms of what we see now and how the final rankings will look. But right now, to your point, Hakeem, yes, it's about when you lose compared to having that 1 loss or 2 loss, a la Alabama.
Well, and you take a look at what's coming up this week. The biggest game in terms of implications is USC at Oregon. If USC finds a way to win out, the committee is going to have a hard time keeping them out.
Yeah, we're going to have a conversation about USC, absolutely, if they're able to win that game. But if Oregon wins that game, by the way, that gives Oregon a really, really good win. You could have Oregon jump Ole Miss, for instance. And, I mean, you could get enough carnage, which how this works, that Oregon could find their way to sneak in the top 4 when all is said. And I'm talking about in December after conference championships are played. One of these Big Ten teams is not going to be in that top 4. Maybe Texas Tech loses, and one of those SEC teams also is going to be out of the top 4. So Oregon could find their way to kind of slink up into the top 4 when all is said and done.
And, Danny, there's a way that Michigan could find their way into the college football playoff. If they were to beat the Buckeyes, which they've done for 4 years in a row, I don't really want to think about that being a reality, but it certainly is a reality. That game is at the Big House in Ann Arbor. There's also a situation where Oregon has to go to Washington in a rivalry game there. That's never an easy place to play for any team.
There's a scenario where you could have a logjam of 10-2 teams that are just all right there, and what do you do, who you keep out? And if you want expansion to 16 teams or whatever it is, that's probably what you're rooting for. I think 12 teams is perfect, but there is a scenario we could have a bunch of those 10-2 teams, and then who are you going to lose out? And by the way, Ole Miss, who is, looks like they're sitting pretty at 5, if they lose to Mississippi State and you really start digging into their resume, they haven't played a great non-conference schedule. They don't own that many wins that are really signature wins. They did beat Oklahoma, so that would be a nice win for them. But outside of that, their resume isn't great. So there's a bunch of teams that we feel like are safe, and yet they've got rivalry games. Some of them are on the road, and you've got other teams that could win their way in and be in the same conversation. So I think there's still a lot of shuffling that could take place, and it could be really interesting because tonight it's kind of boring. Doesn't look like that much happened tonight, but it's college football. We still got a couple weeks left, rivalry weekend. This thing could get interesting for that final selection.
Hey, I got a question for you guys. Is there a possibility that a 3-loss team get in the final 12?
Yeah.
And
if Alabama loses in the SEC championship game.
In
right?
the SEC championship.
Yes.
You're saying regular season,
No,
BMAC, right?
Yeah, I'm saying regular season. Hypothetically
so.
speaking, what happens if Texas beat Texas A&M at the end of the season?
Texas is cooked.
There's too
Texas
much.
is cooked.
There's too much.
You can't lose to Florida, who's not that good this year, and you can't lose the way you did against Georgia. I thought it would have been close. If they would have lost by a field goal, looking at a good loss like the Ohio State loss, then yeah, I could see a chance. But I think the logjam of 10-2 teams plus the fact that they lost to Georgia the way they did and losing to Florida, I think Texas is cooked. Everyone's kind of promoting that. I don't know why that keeps lingering around. Maybe it's to give hope. Maybe it's to drive up ratings for the Texas A&M game. But they're not getting in. Texas is done.
I agree, Danny. You can't sit here for the same people who want to argue that head-to-head is absolutely a thing that matters regarding Miami, Notre Dame. You can't then sit here and tell me you want Texas in after they get absolutely smoked by Georgia and they have a really bad loss against a Florida team that might not make a bowl game. So, yes, I agree with you, Danny.
I'm going to let you know right now, we're not going to talk about Texas ever again on a Tuesday night here for the next 2 weeks. I'm just telling you that. That was the last time I said it. That was the last time I said Texas. Okay? That's the last time I said it. We're going to talk about this, though, for weeks to come, at least for 1 week. Here's a look at the projected bracket. And Notre Dame and Oklahoma, that 8-9 game. So Notre Dame going to have to travel to Norman. Tulane, welcome to the party. I like Tulane. Texas Tech, that'd be an interesting 12-5 game. Miami and Ole Miss, all right. Alabama and Oregon in the first round. And You see who's waiting there in the quarterfinals. What's a matchup here that you go, like, does Tulane have a chance to beat Texas Tech or no chance at all, BMAC?
They have a chance. They have a chance. Would I put anything on it? No. Texas Tech, they're too explosive. They're too explosive. And that defensive front, I mean, you know, in terms of championship football, games are won and lost in the trenches. I mean, Texas Tech, defensively, their defensive line can go. They got a bunch of pros on there, along with one of the best linebackers in the game. So they have too many dudes on the defensive side, I think, that would take that game into deep waters for Texas Tech to be able to prevail and win that game. So, I wouldn't put anything on any upsets happening in that matchup.
Danny, I want to draw your eye to that matchup between Alabama and Oregon. The Tide have to go out to Eugene and potentially play in some nasty, rainy football weather. And it's not that they haven't ever played in weather like that, but if Alabama's got to go to Eugene, oh man, that could be an absolute dynamite matchup.
That would be awesome. For 20 years, we heard teams, you can't go win in Big Ten country, or you can't go win up north. And last year we saw Tennessee try to do it, and we saw a lot of fans travel up to Ohio State. We saw how that worked out. This is one of the things where I do think in the seeding, because we just talk about getting in, that home field advantage in that, in that first round game, if you don't get the bye, that is a huge, huge edge. It is so hard to win on the road in college football during the regular season. You throw in even more adverse weather as it gets colder, and you throw in even more volatile fans that are even more crazy, and that would be insane to watch that unfold. So I think that's a matchup I'm here. Can I hit on something on Tulane, though? Because I do think Tulane was a good winner for the committee, because remember, in the AP Top 25 that was released, James Madison was the top-ranked team. But this is where I think the committee does more research than the voters, who may or may not go back to the last five. They're probably tired from watching games. They throw them in there. This tells me they're looking at strength of schedule for the group of five, and that they're actually looking at Tulane as a 2-loss team versus James Madison as a 1-loss team, saying, you know what? They scheduled 3 Power 4 opponents. They beat 2 of them in Duke and Northwestern. And you had James Madison, who only scheduled 1 in Louisville, and they lost by 2 touchdowns. So I think that is good that the committee is paying attention to the group of five's strength of schedule. And I think Tulane was a potential, winner from at least leapfrogging them in this ranking.
Yeah, the new metric, record strength, plays a huge role in these rankings. Coming up, more reaction to the third set of college football playoff rankings. The guys are back next on CBS Sports HQ. Keep it locked.